There have been many Dark Ladies of the Sith, but there has only ever been one Empress. Greetings Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. The one fair aspect about the ruthless culture of the Sith is that they respect power no matter where it stems. Male or female, if you prove to have enough strength in the Force and you're dangerously cunning, you can rise to the highest ranks. The Sith Order wouldn't exist without Sorza Sin, the Dark Lady who navigated the Dark Jedi to Korriban in the first place and helped them integrate into the Sith pure-blooded's culture. Women like Belia Darzu, who had a reign of terror that almost brought the Republic to its knees with her wicked techno-virus created using Sith alchemy. And the rule of two would have ceased to exist if it weren't for the heroics, or rather, the evil, of Darth Acina, who managed to slay her master before he could destroy all of the Sith's knowledge. But while all of these sirens of darkness are impressive in their own right, Darth Acina is the one that we will be discussing in today's holocron. Of all of the Dark Lords throughout the Sith history, there has only ever been 5 Sith Emperors. One of them was Malgus, who is technically illegitimate. Empress Acina, though, was the only female in the Sith Order to rise to that position. The position of Empress, and she unfortunately gets very much overshadowed by the much more impressive Vitiate and Darth Sidious. But in today's holocron, we will pay our respects to the ruler who kept the Sith Empire together during a time when it faced total annihilation. Acina got her beginning in the way that most Sith do, arriving on Korriban and being sent to kill vermin in the tombs of the Valley of the Dark Lords. This was a humiliating ritual, but all Sith trainees made to go through it as it made them more powerful, as it also showed them their place in the caste system. But this mediocrity would not sit well with the Dark Lady Acina, and she very quickly rose through the ranks of the Empire and landed a position as a Dark Lord during the decade-long time known as the Cold War. The year was 3640 BBY, and the conflict known as the Second Great Galactic War had just begun. This was during a time of Vitiate's reconstituted Sith and a time where they were attacking the Republic. A war of nearly 30 years had characterized the First Great Galactic War, and then there was an 11-year ceasefire which was called the Cold War. But all of the border skirmishes had finally reached a breaking point, and the war was back on in full force. Sometime after the war had begun yet again, Darth Acina rose to the position of the Dark Council member, and was chosen by the Emperor's hand to be the head of the Sphere of Technology. This sphere of influence oversaw the creation and the storage of revolutionary technologies, superweapons, and cybernetics. Originally, this position had been held by the infamous Darth Mechus, who engineered the Sunraiser and many more superweapons for the Sith Empire. But Acina would eventually succeed her seat, and became the overseer of the Arcanum. This was a space station warehouse which housed the most dangerous Sith artifacts in the entire Empire. Acina managed to lie low for a while, keep herself from being a target while attending her duties. But everything was turned on its head after the arrival of the Eternal Empire. Behind the scenes, Vitiate's primary proxy body had been defeated by the Jedi, the hero of Tython, and Vitiate's spirit was put in a sort of recovery hibernation. This knowledge was not privy to many members of the Dark Council, and it was kept a deep-held secret. They did not elect another emperor, and decided to rule the Empire themselves as a whole united council. However, the reborn Revan performed a ritual that would reawake Vitiate, so that Revan could murder him personally. The ritual, though, was a failure, and only served to free Vitiate's spirit, allowing it to rejoin his body in wild space. This was, of course, now Emperor Valkorion. Valkorion and Vitiate had secretly constructed an empire out of a superstitious, but a technologically advanced people group on the world of Zakul. Using their ancient weapon, the Eternal Fleet, Valkorion now commanded the most advanced armada that the galaxy had ever seen. Using extremely advanced AI technology, it required no crew, and it could make battlefield decisions in milliseconds. In a swift move, Valkorion launched the Eternal Raids. This saw his sons, Arcanum and Thexan, sweep across the Outer Rim, destroying armies from both the Republic and the Sith Empire alike. But after, Prince Arcanum would betray and murder his father's body, taking the mantle of the Emperor. Now in control of the extremely nimble Eternal Fleet, the war that Arcanum waged was swift and destructive. He boldly attacked both the Republic and the Sith at once, blasting their shipyards and blockading all of their major trade routes. Within a scant 3 months, the Eternal Fleet achieved naval superiority over both sides of the war, and by the end of 3636 BBY, both the Republic capital of Coruscant and the Imperial capital of Dromund Kaas were blockaded by the Eternal Empire successfully. The Dark Council had attempted to fight against this new threat, but one by one, each of the members fell by the power of the Eternal Empire. Darth Acina was the first to recognize that the Sith were now completely outmatched. By the time they signed a treaty with Zakul, only herself and Darth Vorwan remained as the sole members of the Dark Council, originally a group of 12. Acina acknowledged the current state of things. The wounded Sith desperately needed new leadership, and she had no one to stand in her way to take that power. Acina would assume control over the entire empire and declared herself the Empress of the Sith. In an effort to preserve her faction though, she declared loyalty to Arcanum, who would then publicly acknowledge her claim to the Sith throne. 5 years later, and Acina would bide her time. She knew that an opportunity would eventually present itself to overthrow all of the yoke placed upon the Sith by Zakuul. The Eternal Empire was simply too powerful to confront now though, and they had dispatched the Heralds of Xildrog to keep an eye over the two factions of the galaxy. These Heralds of the Dark Side were a cult that swore a religious fealty to Arcanum. Acina despised them deeply though, but her mind was on the preservation of the Sith. Because of this, the majority of the population greatly supported Acina as Empress, as she had their interests in mind much more than Vitiate ever had. She was certainly the lesser of the two evils. Finally, her opportunity to strike would come when Arcanum was defeated by the hand of the Outlander during the Battle of Odessen. The Outlander became the commander and organized the Alliance. This was a faction comprised of anyone, regardless of origin, who opposed Zakuul. Acina realized that the alliance that defeated Arcanum would be strong enough to eventually defeat her as well, but more importantly, to take out the new Empress, Arcanum's sister, Vaylin. And so Empress Acina took the opportunity that the Force had provided her. She openly defied her heralds and destroyed them, putting an end to an era of Sith submission. But when Vaylin's Eternal Fleet launched an invasion of the world of Voss, Acina set the Imperial fleet to aid the Alliance in battle. Her timing was impeccable, and the Sith ended up being the saviors that day. In the aftermath, Empress Acina acknowledged the Alliance as an independent power and invited the commander to Dromund Kaas to negotiate an agreement between the two groups. This outcome was significant because the Republic at this time was far too weak and afraid of Zakuul to openly join the Alliance, but the Sith would take the step that the Republic would not. It was up to Acina, her leadership of the Sith, to be the heroes on that day. Now away from prying eyes, Acina assured the commander that her offer was genuine, and that she had no intention of taking the eternal throne for herself. The conversation though was interrupted by a sudden engine failure, which had been the result of sabotage. Now stuck in the wilderness of Dromund Kaas, Empress Acina and the commander were forced to contend with the planet's dangerous wildlife and lightning storms. The pair eventually discovered that their shuttle had been sabotaged by the Geno Haradan, a shadowy organization of assassins that guided galactic politics through murder. Originally, the Empress had believed that they were a myth, but they had been sent by the former Chancellor of the Republic, who had still had spite for the Sith, to destroy their common enemy. However, the legendary assassins proved no match for the Alliance commander and the Empress of the Sith. Now aiding the Alliance, Acina provided the resources of the vast empire to them, and eventually, her bet paid off, as the commander would kill Vaylin, and with her end, the threat of Valkorian's spirit permanently ended as well. Unfortunately though, this left the Eternal Throne empty, leading to the droid captains of the Eternal Fleet to revert back to their basic programming. This caused the fleet to bombard all inhabited worlds indiscriminately, and Empress Acina issued an emergency distress call directly to the Alliance. The Alliance, though, laid claim to the Eternal Throne and took control over the Eternal Fleet. But although her allies had saved her, it was the way of the Sith to be wary of those with more power. And with the commander now in charge of the fleet, they rebranded themselves into the Eternal Alliance. Now suspicious, Acina began preparing her people for war, even though the cleanup had just continued. Soon though, the battle with the Republic resumed, as the status quo restored. Jedi versus Sith, Empire versus Republic. Later, the Sith would receive anonymous intel regarding an immensely powerful weapon on the recently discovered world of Locath. After hearing this, Empress Acina quickly sent a detachment of Imperial forces to secure the weapon. While on Locath though, the Imperials encountered Republic forces who were after the same thing. And to make things even worse, the Eternal Alliance's fleet would also arrive. The Alliance commander had planned to hold a meeting with the two factions, since Locath was technically neutral ground. Once again concerned though, Acina sent an ambassador to the commander, with the orders to sabotage the meeting and escape should the Alliance turn against the Sith. The Empress herself made contact over hologram, and formally asked the commander to side with the Sith Empire against the Republic once and for all. After all, the Sith had been the ones to help the Alliance originally against the Eternal Empire, while the Republic sat back and did nothing. But the commander made the call that the Jedi and the Republic were the more benevolent and trustworthy faction despite everything that had occurred. Acina wasted no time in launching her attack against both the Republic and the Alliance once she knew things would not work out in her favor in this meeting. and the Sith soon went to take control of the superweapon, not realizing its real danger. It was later revealed that the ancient Lokathi race had been the ones to construct the Eternal Fleet originally. They were specialized in the creation of powerful superweapons, but none compared to the superweapons that lay dormant on this planet. They were known as the Old Gods, or the Six Gods. They were the original Lokashi architects, as titanic droid superweapons were utilized and used against civilizations to pacify, subjugate, and even destroy them. This had originally led to the deaths of trillions long ago. But just like with the Eternal Fleet, the Old Gods were controlled by using a throne. However, this throne was not indiscriminate to whoever sat upon it like the Eternal Throne had been. Empress Acina was aware of this and attempted to forcefully take control of the Old Gods and their power. But upon sitting on the throne, it rejected her and mortally wounded her in the process. With her last words, she apologized to the commander for her grave error, as she had only just then realized the terrible destructive power that the Old Gods wielded. And with that, Empress Acina passed on and was no more. Acina would be remembered as a very pragmatic Sith that did everything she could for the progression of the Empire. She was not irritating to get along with the other Dark Lords, and conversation with her was described as peaceful, some even calling it a pleasurable guessing game. Although many Sith branded her as a cowardly opportunist, many acknowledged her more measured and calculated approach that enabled her to rise higher than anyone predicted. Some even began to call her the wisest of the Sith. Interestingly though, despite being the head of the sphere of technology, she did not indulge in cybernetic body modifications as her peers did. She took an interest in plants as a side hobby. Nevertheless though, she was cunning and ruthless, always lamenting that one part about her being Empress she disliked so much was not getting to use her lightsaber very often at all. It was more of a diplomatic game. And on that note, she wielded a very unique saber staff. Much like herself, it was practical, industrial in design, without any sort of ornate decoration. It seemed to be two sabers connected at the pommel, but each one had a strange guard on it which served as a secondary handle. So in a weird way, her saber staff featured 4 handles. She was also one of the few Sith that wielded an amethyst purple blade. All in all, Empress Acina was the leader of the Empire that needed it in this brief era. She did her best to further the interests of the faction as a whole, and not just herself as Vitiate had. She was willing to forge alliances against a common enemy, but let her paranoia get the better of her in the end. But tell us, what do you think about the only female Sith Emperor in all of galactic history that we could find? Do you believe that she would have been good for the future of the Sith? Could she have changed them if she had lived longer? Or did power consume her as well? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for joining us in the archives today, and may the Force be with you.